So, kids, we are live. Today, I have a live stream with Faust the Disagreeable, all the way from Holland. We're going to talk about what happened to the left, and we're going to talk about various different issues. For example, is the left in any way redeemable? Were they ever really on the ball when it came to certain issues? And why have they become so bad in recent years? We're also going to whinge a little bit about the right wing as well. So, welcome to the show, Faust. How are you?
Thank you, Thomas. I'm good. Can't complain about anything special, really. Lockdown measures have been lifted a little bit. Pubs are sort of semi-open over here. So,
you're looking very pumped today.
I just had a squat session. Squat and overhead press. So, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes, someone asking in the chat, Unwashed isn't here. I threatened to wash him. That's why he's not here.
Oh, yes. I'm afraid I should explain. Unwashed has pulled out at the last moment. I don't know whether that's a habit he has in general, but he has pulled out at the last moment, and so it's just Faust and I for the moment. Now, if there is anyone else who would like to come on later on in the stream, then please let us know in the chat. Let me just say a few things before we start. A few people have been asking me to address the various different things said about me on Kiwi Farms. The thing is, I want to make it clear, I'm not running away from any of the things that have been said about me. But the thing is that I'm not a major celebrity, and so nobody really cares, right? That's the thing. So in that sense, it's probably just best to ignore what's been said. I should point out, look, some of the things are true, maybe 50% are true, 50% are not true. However, the person who has written all this stuff is, how can I say, they're a person who is always drunk, it seems, okay? So this person is hardly a reliable source, okay? And it's also a person who thinks, it's a man who thinks he's a woman. So I don't know whether to address any of this stuff, but look, what I want to say is, if there's people like some northern nationalist in the chat and you want to troll me on this issue, that's absolutely fine. I don't care. I'm up for the banter. That's fine. But the thing I want to make clear to certain people in the chat and certain people who are trolling in the chat is that I won't tolerate any trolling of my guests from this moment on. So if from this point onwards you start trolling guests, then I will kick you out of the chat. That's the warning, and that's the final warning I'll give on that. So let's move on to the debate. Faust, what I'm interested, first of all, and I will answer this question myself in a second, is were you ever a leftist, and in what sense were you ever a leftist?
Right. I kind of suggested this topic to you because I had a little bit of a talk with a friend of mine about this, and it's something we sort of realized, because my friend's vegan and he's really big into this vegan movement. I'm vegetarian. I have a background in the environmentalist movement. But yeah, I used to be quite a lefty when I was, I don't know, 15, 16 or so, and sort of LARPing as a communist anarchist, sort of what Antifa is today. I was doing that like 15 years ago or so. And but we were more serious about it back then, in my opinion. When I look at what these guys are talking about these days, and that's why I wanted to do this stream, because I think it's an interesting thing to discuss. And I particularly wanted to have other people who are these days right-wing or nationalists or dissident, who have a past as left-wingers. Because I think you've kind of gone brain dead on the left. Even compared to 15 years ago, the topics they discuss have narrowed massively.
Yes, I don't know whether there's a bit of a lag here. I'm interested. I actually, when you say you were a leftist back when you were 15 or 16, I think that's highly forgivable. But I had imagined you were actually like a leftist sort of 18, 19, 20, 21. I mean, is that also true, or?
What really pushed me towards the red pill stuff is that when I went to university, I also social work for about 2 years with the idea I'm going to help integrate these migrants. I'm going to, help these poor people who are having such a hard time in the Netherlands. And 2 years of social work really rather disabused me of the notion that that is actually possible. And that's how I sort of started looking for alternative solutions and so on. But even back when I was a leftist, I was never really on the socially progressive side of things. It was more like the old school communism, social democracy. My father was an old school communist, had a lot of Marx and Engels literature and Bakunin and so on lying around the house, and I read that when I was quite young. So I was never really on the like, we need to make everything about gays and trannies sort of bandwagon of leftism. It was all about class and economic fairness and means of production sort of rhetoric. But yeah, what really pushed me towards right was actually being confronted with what these people are like in reality. That's what pushed me away from the left. And first I went to a bit more populist sort of, the problem is Islam and the problem is culture. And if we just manage to raise them out of their backwards ways, they'll become just like us. And by the time I was about 25, I completely moved towards the right.
Yeah. Can I ask how old you are? I'm a bit confused.
I'm around 30. I'm hesitant to give my exact age.
Okay. Yes, I had genuinely thought you were more sort of my age, which is I'm 41 now. So I had thought you were sort of, you know, but that's actually very young, and that is typically the age of most people in this sphere, I find.
Yes.
So I mean, I should say, just, you know, if people ask me the question, was I ever a leftist? I will say that in my head, when I was 16, when I was in sixth form, I did sort of think that communist ideas would be good because I was very upset at the world at that time and I hated capitalism. And so for 6 months in my head, I was sort of a communist. What disabused me of being a communist was the very few discussions I had with my classmates on the issues, who all ridiculed me for it. And I very soon saw the errors of my ways. The only thing after that, which could possibly be classified as leftism, is that when I went to university, I started working for Oxfam, like volunteering for Oxfam. And the reason I did that, it's a bit cringe, but the reason I did that was because I wanted to save the world, because I was so horrified by starving African children. And it really motivated. I thought, I just can't live in a world where, you know, African children are starving, and I want to do something to change that. And that, in some ways, that was a red pilling process as well, because I realized various different things working for this Oxfam. One of which was that a lot of people involved in it didn't really care that much. There was a lot of sort of virtue signaling going on. And also I realized I'm not changing anything. And this was also when I went to university, which was where I got to meet people from different races. And I realized, for example, that often they weren't very nice. Or, for example, lots of the foreign students were very rich. So it kind of made a mockery of this idea that me, the white man, needed to help starving kids in Africa. So those are some of the leftist things that I was once into. That's what I'd say on that.
It's funny that Oxfam Novib has had a few scandals, of course. Many, the Green Left is quite involved with Oxfam Novib over here in the Netherlands. And back during the period where they were, you know, withholding food aid in return for sex in Haiti and things like that. This was when there were Dutch Green Left people in charge of Oxfam Novib. And funnily enough, they've never been kicked out of the party, even though they were directly in charge during that scandal. Yeah, I do still have some of my lefty precedents in the sense that I'm still quite big on environmentalism. I'm very I prefer using a bicycle on public transportation. I don't eat meat and things like that. And that's one of the topics I actually want to bring up here. I don't know if you want to go into specific topics yet, or.
Yes, I actually thought maybe we would start with environmentalism. I'm interested to know your opinion on this. I think my personal stance is that I think the whole climate change, global warming is kind of fake. And I don't know whether you agree with that. But what I do think, however, is that it's silly to like just burn things, like, you know, burn fossil fuels just for no reason, you know, so some idiots can have a holiday in Magaluf or something. So I think that there is huge problems with like wasting fossil fuels. There's also like the litter problem, the plastic problem. So I'm interested in what you think, Faust. So what's your environmental ideas? What are they now and what have they been in the past?
Well, to specifically first make this about the left as a movement sort of thing, what I noticed back when I was involved with it it was a lot about individual action. It was all about like reducing your consumption and making ethical choices for yourself, and like starting communes. I did volunteering on a like a farming commune for a month once. And those are the kind of like really hardcore people who only wear like natural fibers and these sorts of things. And I don't see that so much in the modern environmentalist movement, because what I see more and more is it's become a very bourgeois kind of thing to signal that you're pro-environmentalist, but you don't really want to reduce any of your lifestyle choices. So instead of, you know, using a bicycle more, using public transportation more, you'll just say you'll buy an electrical car with government subsidy, preferably. And you're not going to stop eating meat. You'll just, you know, you'll eat like eat the bugs instead of stopping to eat meat, you know, these sorts of things. And it's really become more of a marketing strategy for a lot of companies, where they'll just proclaim to have a green agenda, then buy carbon credits in some third world country, compensate it that way and say it's good that way. Tesla entirely runs on green energy subsidies, for example. They don't actually turn a profit. The same thing goes with things like solar panels and windmills. Now, I personally don't object to solar panels. I think solar panels can be part of the solutions, but it's not enough. Solar panels would be one of the more ethical ways, I think, to reduce your own footprint and your own consumption, because you're not taking off so much of the grid and you can decentralize. And I'm big on decentralizing things. But yeah, that's the thing with the leftist movement. I think it's become incredibly corporate and co-opted by the establishment, and people like Greta Thunberg, people like her, Extinction Rebellion, don't come across to me as very authentic people, because they live incredibly rich lifestyles and they're not willing to sacrifice very much in their personal lives, and they get all this money and fame from it. So really it's more of a public strategy. On the topic of environmental change, of course there's environmental change. If you look throughout the history of the planet, there has been all kinds of cycles. The planet used to be just a volcano. There is such a thing as the oxygen holocaust, which is always a funny little thing. Is there's one type of bacteria at one point which learned to synthesize oxygen, and it destroyed everything that couldn't. And we are all descended from that one particular bacteria that could synthesize oxygen. And this resulted in sexual reproduction developing, because oxygen is very corrosive and it hurts your DNA over your lifespan. So you need a way to refresh your DNA, and the solution that we found, that nature came up with, is sexual reproduction. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. I think environmentalism is a genuine issue. Climate change is a genuine issue, but it's not necessarily all about man-made things. I think the problem is when environmentalists focus on these very big abstract things like CO2 and carbon emissions and these sorts of things. That's a way to make it so big picture that the average individual feels powerless to change anything. And I think it really, you have to, if you're an environmentalist who actually wants to change anything, you have to address people on their individual ability to affect things, because many little changes make a big change. And I think something like talking about CO2 and plastics in the oceans, even though those are to an extent real issues, is just to make it so that the individual is disempowered. That would be my take on that.
Yes, that's very interesting. I think there's a variety of things I want to say on that. First of all, this business about oxygen, the oxygen holocaust, and how that gave rise to sexual reproduction. We will talk about that in the neo-Darwinist stream, which will be coming up in a few weeks' time, because that in itself is a very interesting thing. I think, to echo what you were saying about the environmental stuff, it reminds me of when I worked at Oxfam, which is that you have all these people on the left who care, in quotes, and yet ultimately they do absolutely nothing. And it's just it's an exercise in virtue signaling, and they won't they won't actually do anything in their personal lives to make a difference. But so I think in general, what you're saying about the environmental movement is that the left are sort of, the issue is an important one, but the left essentially mishandle it by sort of just virtue signaling about it. Or
the left occasionally makes good points on many things. Their solutions are almost inevitably wrong because their general Weltanschauung is wrong. So Marx has a few points in his writings which I still agree with, which is that all value is produced from labor, because essentially without the transformative energy of labor, things are just worthless. Like land without a farmer is nothing. Iron ore without a smith is nothing. You know, you need labor input to create something of value, and labor produces all the consumer goods and luxuries and foodstuffs that we need to stay alive. And of course, this doesn't mean that value is actually determined by labor. That's determined by markets, market pricing and supply and demand and so on. But it still means that the origin of all value comes from labor. And he also said that within modern Western financial capital systems, capital accumulates value faster than labor, and that this is a perverse system of incentive. And I also agree with him that, because if you look at the policies of central banking over the last few decades, where they essentially stimulate the what is the aandelenmarkt in English? The stock market. They privilege the stock market over the real economy, and we see the result of that is that there is far too much capital in the system, and we see a centralization of the means of production in a funny sort of communistic way, ironically. So I think Mark was right on those 2 points. In the same way, I think a lot of leftists are right about human impact on the environment. We could do things to mitigate our impact on it, not necessarily because we might destroy it, because I think we'd be destroying ourselves first before we destroy everything else. But more so because it is also alienating towards society. I think Ted Kaczynski made quite a few good points about urbanism and technology and so on, alienating us from the natural world. And if you see, of course, how leftists live today, I think the distributist made this point in a stream he did a few days ago. And what he was sort of referencing without knowing is this hyperrealism, which is a concept from a French Marxist called Lacan. Whereas people live in a media-created world, because they are on the internet so much, because they play so many video games, they are completely detached from the real world. They have no concept of value creation. They have no concept of real suffering or anything like that, and everything to them becomes an abstraction, and the things that are important to them are not things that are invested in their own personal achievements or anything like that, but they live by the narrative created by others for them. So that's one of the problems of modern leftism, and one of the reasons I'm big in favor of a sort of volkische Bewegung, Wandelvogel idea of return to nature, because if you lose all touch with nature, you lose touch with reality, and you become a complete abstraction. And that's why I think environmentalism is also important in a very real sociological and societal sense.
Yes, indeed. And I would champion like community projects where, whereby if everyone would just take care of their own community and, upkeep that would at least be a start. Of course, one of the things about environmentalism, which is paradoxical for the left, is that the left will claim that all these companies are doing X, Y, and Z, but the left are very much in league with the big corporations. That's obvious at this stage. Do you want to get in now to the topic of, have the left ever been truly against capitalism? Are they against the banks? And from there, shall we talk about a bit about the Occupy Wall Street stuff?
Sure. Let me address one thing real quick. One person said in the chat, carbon is good. Carbon is good up to a point. There is such a thing called the carbon cycle, and it's just carbon sinking to the bottom in the ground, consumed by trees, and being turned into plant matter. If there is too much carbon in the atmosphere, it becomes poisonous. It's a very corrosive substance as well. One theory on Venus, for example, is Venus could maybe have been a livable planet with liquid water on it, but because of the high concentration of carbon on the atmosphere, it became too hot and too poisonous, too toxic, and it couldn't sustain life. So carbon is good up to an extent. It's like anything, oxygen, we need it to live. It's also what's killing us. It's what causes cancer. It's what causes old age. Yet you would die without oxygen as well. Now, you wanted to talk on banking and
banking, capitalism, and the Wall Street movement. I mean, okay, here's the question. I don't think that the left at this moment in time are against capitalism, except in a rhetorical sense. But they're so in bed with the big corporations that there's no truth to the idea that they're against big companies or capitalism in general. I mean, were they ever against capitalism?
I think it's some for sure were. I think a lot of them are disprivileged people looking for power, and when they achieve power, that's all they really wanted. So they're not ideologically consistent people really anyway. They're just looking for any means to gain power, to gain influence, to satisfy their own egos or whatever, and whatever agenda suits them best is what they do. This is probably true of most of humanity, and only very principled people would be really opposed to something like capitalism. So I think some people probably were. I think Marx probably was quite opposed to capitalism. I think Bakunin probably was quite opposed to capitalism. Mostly because Marx was actually from quite wealthy family. His uncle was Philips, one of the big industrialists of the Netherlands. He had the support of Engels and others. So he had access to power, but he kind of squandered it. So of course there are some ideological leftists who are genuinely opposed to the banks, but I think most people, and I noticed this when I was in the left as well, a lot of people are just looking for some sort of meaning, something to give them some purpose, some greater agenda, and some means to get an in-group and to find a way towards power. So a lot of modern leftism is just down to the corruptible nature of most of humanity. And I wanted to get into this as well. I wrote this note to you. I think one of the reasons the modern left has become about nothing but colonization is awful, racism, trannies, homosexuals, partly because that's an agenda that's been passed down to them and it's deliberately told to them to follow it, but also it's become the mainstream. And you notice on the right, you get a lot of intellectual people and a lot of sort of different and thinking people. You get a lot of original thought. That's because it's a dissident movement. And back when the left was a dissident movement, they attracted a lot of creative minds. And whenever a movement, an ideology, a system becomes popularized, it starts appealing to the lowest common denominator, and it attracts a lot of low IQ people. And this means the discourse gets dragged down, and it's just the only talking points become about the most comprehensible thing to most people. Which is why, in my opinion, things like the Catholic Church and so on instituted hierarchy and instituted mysticism and instituted a system of meritocracy where people who are skilled enough could only come up. The original idea of the university is like this as well. You need to put up barriers to entry because you need to know for sure that the people coming in aren't going to drag the whole dang thing down into the ditch. And that's what happened to the left. It's become too popular and they didn't put up any barriers. So I think that's one of the main causes of this process happening. Now, there are other causes. You talk about Occupy Wall Street, and it's of course now a famous meme that the whole progressive agenda started becoming very popular right around the time of Occupy Wall Street. And it has been pushed massively by corporations. So it's probably a way for them to encapsulate and safely conduct these energies away from critiquing the actual power structure, which is, to a large extent, capitalist oligarchy at this point. I mean, it's not the nobility, it's not the priesthood in charge anymore, it's not the warriors, it's the money power. And that is absolutely true. And I'm no socialist or of any kind, but I do think capital has gained far too prominent a position in modern society.
Can I say a few things about Occupy Wall Street? Because this is the kind of thing that I've never really, I would say I've never really had respect for. And I always understood that Occupy Wall Street, in my interpretation, and tell me if this is wrong, it was nothing more than a sort of Extinction Rebellion type protest that you will see today. And whilst there's a lot of legitimate reasons to hate bankers, I think you could be a good socialist, like a proper, genuine socialist, and dislike the bankers. And of course, for us in the distant right, or in conspiracy circles, I think we have very deep reasons for disliking the bankers. But wasn't Occupy Wall Street, my feeling about it was that it was just a bunch of kind of Extinction Rebellion types.
It became that. At one point, the libertarian movement in the USA was very much on board with Occupy Wall Street and the old school type, social democratic, communistic types, workers of the world sort of types. Those were all on board with it as well. And it became this really hippie-like, degenerated sort of thing later on. But that's why I think it was such a turning point in the discourse of the left, is because it did unite so many people on so many sides against the banks, and they've completely managed to draw that attention away from them. It's all about the white man and colonialism now, and banks have been doing the same thing they've been doing in 2008. It's even worse at this point. Central banks have over the last 12 years completely just damaged the economy. Purchasing power parity hasn't increased. Of course, we can look back all the way to the 1970s when we left the gold standard. Production kept increasing, real wages haven't increased, things like that. There are also other factors, women entering the more labor force, immigration. But yeah, I think what made them push this agenda, and this shows that everything is sort of conducted top down, that there is that most culture, most ideas are put out there by elites, is that they did feel genuinely threatened at that point, I think. And yeah, they started pushing this stuff we have now.
That is a take that I've often heard. I'm not sure I agree with it myself. Another thing that I wanted to come back to on is the idea that the left, you said that the left were, when they were more fringe, that was when they had better thinkers and better ideas. But has the left really been fringe in recent years? I think, haven't the left been in the ascendancy at least for the last 50, 70, 100 years?
But yes, but it's a slow process. In 1990, they weren't yet the cultural dominant majority. They were able to influence the culture to a large extent. At this point, they're a cultural hegemon. There is no way you can challenge leftist ideas in a serious setting like academia, politics, or anything like that, or media. You can only sort of talk to the lower classes who sort of instinctively feel things are wrong, or, you know, in distant chats and in whispered tones in some back alley cafe. That's about it.
I didn't quite catch that last point, but let me move on to this, which is that I would say that, you know, ever since the French Revolution, there's been a decline in sort of class standards, and that I would say is a kind of leftist thing. That the left really for the last 250 years have been gaining a lot of traction. I mean, so I think the left have always been, I'm not saying that like the left haven't had legitimate complaints about capitalism and being exploited and this kind of thing, but the overthrow of the class system came a long, long time ago. And when it came, I think people on the left have had a certain amount of power.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but you see, okay.
Well, I think the death blow really was around a century ago at the end of the First World War that really destroyed the last empires and the last bastions of the idea of nobility and therefore really structured class. And one of the things in modernity is, of course, is that the bourgeoisie hides to an extent the fact that they are of a higher class, that they are an elite. They try to pretend they're just common folk like you because they don't have any titles or any like they don't have inherited titles or anything like that. But yeah, the thing is, class awareness was a big thing of Marxist rhetoric for a very long time. To be aware of being working class was an important thing. But yes, these days they seem to have sort of succeeded and are aiming for a totally classless society where everyone perceives themselves to be sort of just human. And that is very much in line with the egalitarian ideas. Now, someone said in the chat, do Marxists and liberals agree on economics and culture? No, they don't. They do agree on culture, absolutely. Liberals and Marxists are both humanists in the sense that they take humanity as a measure of everything, human values, human interests. They don't look to a higher power or a higher ideal. They don't believe in God or anything like that. They're egalitarian. They're atheistic. So yes, I consider classical liberals just one stage behind Marxism. Marxism is a development to a large extent of a lot of ideas coming from liberalism, like from Hegel and a lot of the economic theories Marx based himself on, from Smith and Ricardo and Malthus and so on. So of course, I think it is, and Rousseau was a massive influence on Marx, particularly on the idea of human nature. So yes, I think liberalism is just one of the predecessors of Marxism, and the difference between them are quite minor if you compare them to actual conservative worldviews, which believe in eternal truths and things like that, and higher ideals and the idea of God, or whatever way you want to word it. Because, well, but yes, I believe liberalism and Marxism are very comparable, actually.
Okay, let me just say something about the class system, because I personally believe that all the mess that we have gotten into in recent years with sort of female-male equality and racial equality, all of this started with the notion of equality in general amongst white people, and that goes back a long way, maybe 200, 250 years. And for me, one of the things which I've always known is that take someone like what's her name, Claire, I think she's called Claire Fox. She's a British Irish woman, and she's in the House of Lords. Now she got fame recently because she was an old school leftist who came out in favor of the Brexiteers, and she was championed as this great kind of person. But she is typical for me of the kind of person, kind of working class person who has been given a lot. Yeah, I mean, she's probably about 60 years old now, but in her time she was given like scholarships to Cambridge, this kind of thing, and now she's in the House of Lords. And this is something which A, annoys me, and B, shows that the left have had a lot of power for a long time. And this is the sort of woman who is, like I say, she's an old school leftist who's standing up for the working class whites now. But before 20 years ago, she was very much on the side of the left, and she's very much the kind of person who was like, let's bring down the establishment, let's bring down the class system. Everyone who's got more money than me is a bad person. So I find it a bit hard to take that. I personally think the left have had a lot of power for a long time, and I think
of degrees, isn't it? They had power, of course, 60 years ago, but nowhere near what they have now. Because right now we're sort of slowly moving into sort of Soviet levels of constant mind control. Well, mind control isn't the right term, but thought policing, these sorts of things. They could not have enforced the sort of cultural hegemony they have today 30 or 40 years ago. And I think, for example, media technologies like the internet have helped them in that sense, sort of spreading their ideas like a virus. There's a YouTuber called Kenneth Brown who has an interesting theory about, passing on your genes is one way to be immortal in a sense, but passing on ideas is just as powerful to a way, because they can shape more than genetics can. Ideas can influence a lot more than just you having children. For example, Marx had a lot more influence in the world than the fact that he had a few kids.
Sorry, repeat that again, Faust.
I said Marx has a lot more influence on the world than just having a few kids. His ideas have spread like a virus and have really affected the world in a major way. One could say he shaped the 20th century to a large extent.
Yes, indeed. Well, this is always one of the things when people of the distant right talk about having kids. Like Lauren Southern, maybe they said, oh, she needs to have kids, but it's like you also need, think about how many people she's changed to, the philosophy of distant thinking with her videos. Let me just put up this. Someone's asking in the chat class, the chat, Faust, what class are you? Or what class would you regard yourself as? And what are your positions on class?
I'm a firm believer in the restoration of monarchy and aristocracy, because I think it's just a working system until we have something better. I think other alternatives would be some form of technocratic, meritocratic system, but I do not believe that with the current institutions being what they are, a transition towards that would be incredibly dystopian. There's no noblesse oblige, there's no idea of elites having a sense of responsibility or guidance or providing ideals or anything to society. So doing that at this stage would not work. We need to go back to a system that did work, which was monarchy and aristocracy. Myself, I'm just of the middle class, maybe slightly upper middle class. I'm from a fairly wealthy family, but I'm not really of the higher classes, and I wouldn't want to be an aristocrat anyway. If I were to be an aristocrat, I wanted to be in the old German way, where you get promoted on the battlefield, something like that. But I believe the best people should have positions of power in society and to be recognized as better as such, because they genuinely are. If I talk to people who work under me, just working class guys with an IQ of around 100, and I talk to an engineer who works above me, who has an IQ of around 140, you can definitely tell the difference. And I think that should be made very clear, and that people should not have this illusion that they are equal, and that they should accept that some people know better, and they can, even in your own interest, give you orders and instructions. And it's one of the reasons I'm in favor of religion as well. I think leaving people to their own devices, they go completely to pieces. They destroy themselves. And if they don't destroy themselves, they will fill the ideological void with very destructive things like political ideologies. So I'm very much sort of in the archaeofuturist sort of thing. I want to go colonize Mars. I want to know what is at the heart of the universe. I want to pursue scientific inquiry. I'm very big on hard sciences. But I also think the old order worked better than what we have today. And if we're going to change away from the old order, we need a better starting position than what we have now.
Indeed. Some Northern nationalist says better. How do you judge that? Well, we mean better in the sense that the farmer is better than the cattle. That's what we mean. It's kind of obvious to anyone who isn't a hardcore egalitarian that not all humans are equal. But I'm interested, Faust, you say you don't want to be an aristocrat. I mean, I would be happy to become an aristocrat because I feel it's my natural position in life. Do you not? Do you not?
No,
I mean, okay. You said,
go ahead.
You talked about like if you did something on the battlefield, but if you, I mean, I understand that what you're saying there wouldn't there be equivalent things that you could do?
I see myself
an aristocrat.
I see myself as an executor of better people's agendas. I work best as not the captain of a ship, but the first mate, or the stuurman, as we say here, or in a military situation, I do best as a lieutenant or a captain, but not as a general. I prefer not to set out the larger agendas, but to just work well within parameters given to me and perfect those. Really, within the Dutch nationalist movement, I believe I'm doing things that are sort of outside of my purview because I'm not a true intellectual as such. I did go to university, but I studied economics, and I do know some philosophy, some biology, and so on. But I think I'm not a true intellectual, and the things that I do should be in the purview of the true intellectuals. But unfortunately, there aren't any. So you sort of have to take that battlefield promotion and sort of work with what you're given. But yeah, like I said, I work better as sort of a second man executing ideas.
Oh, I mean, I completely understand that. I could never be like, you know, a leader myself, but I could certainly be an advisor to leaders. I think at the age of 40, you know, if you'd have asked me when I was younger, I would have said there's way more intelligent people out there than me. But at this stage, after going through the whole red pill process, I'm like, I've got so much contempt for people who I once thought were intelligent because I just look at their political views. I'm horrified that they're, you know, part of the sort of the leftist globalist cult. What else was I going to say? Okay, there's a variety of other points that you talked about in your Telegram message. So I want to come to those. One of them was about what they used to do to homosexuals, like what the communists, I think, used to do to homosexuals. The past, you say here, the past communists would fusilate homosexuals as being decadent bourgeois kulaks.
Yes, that's what the Soviet Union used to do when Stalin took over. Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's just kind of a little ironic point. Back when I was in communist circles, they were pretty intolerant of gays. Made a lot of jokes about gays, just the standard stuff, of course, but it wasn't at all about this social stuff. And like I say, that was only about 15 years ago. It was all about class and economic welfare and the good of the worker and destroying the system and overthrowing the capitalists. And we were, you know, there were racist communists. There were, I mean, you know, Keith Woods would be one of them probably. But yeah, there were racist communists, homophobic communists. It wasn't at all about this sort of stuff. And especially the ones who are more Stalinist and Maoist side of things rather than the sort of anarchist side. They were very clear on the idea that it was just moral decadence. And they had moral principles as communists, which is something you don't see much anymore these days. All communists you talk to or hear from seem to be anarcho-communists who don't so much subscribe to a lot of things Marx used to say about, say, minorities and sexual deviance.
Indeed. Ivan the Heathen might well be coming on the stream shortly, but we're going to continue with Faust for the moment, because I want to go through some more of the points that you mentioned to me. Another thing that you talked about was the pirate party movement from the early 2000s.
Yes,
and the copyright open source movement.
This is a bugbear of mine. I work with a lot of engineers, people coding software and stuff like that, and a lot of them used to also be really engaged with this sort of stuff. I mean, you know about Linux and open source movement at all?
Not at all.
Right. Linux is like an open source OS system. It's probably the most well-known open source software most people would know about. But a lot of things are open source. So the idea of open source is just you publish the source code that you use and people can look into it and everyone knows sort of what you're doing with it. Everyone can contribute. It's sort of a distributed way to produce software. And it makes it very fair. Well, not fair is not the word, but you can always verify what people are doing with it. So you can't put any like malware in there. You can't put spyware in there, stuff that, or manipulate anything. And for a while, this was a big thing, also associated with like the idea of copyright, fighting against copyright protection. Like the Pirate Bay used to be sort of the ideological sort of example of these political parties, where putting out no one should be able to own anything intellectually. I'm not quite sure about my position on that one yet. There's a lot of things to say for both sides. But on the whole, this was also part of what one might call the left at the time, talking about, open source and talking about copyright. And that's also completely disappeared. And the funny thing, for example, over here in the Netherlands was we had a pirate party, and then a softcore porn actress took it over. Then a whole lot of soy boys got into that movement, pushed out all the nerds who were concerned about things like proprietary software and things like that, and open code. And it became one of those, just another progressive party with nothing unique about them. And throughout Europe in around 2005, there were a lot of these pirate parties. It originally started in Sweden, but it moved throughout all of Northern Europe. And they had some traction and some interesting things to say. Dead, completely dead. All they talk about is gay rights and Chinese anymore, and how terrible the white man is. And that's just one of the many examples of how the topics the left talks about have been very narrowed and just serve a very centralized agenda, because something like open source software, if that were to be institutionalized, very much threatens the power of things like Google and Microsoft, who rely on having proprietary software. There was also this thing is also about patent rights. And well, for example, we are in a technological sort of warfare with China. And patent rights are all fun and great if everyone is a participant in it and agrees to it, but China just doesn't care. So if you publish a patent, China will just copy it because it's all publicly available information. What are you going to do? Sue the Chinese government? You're not going to get into a court in China. So that's the tragedy of the commons issue, right? If everyone abides by the rules, everyone benefits, but the individual benefit to break the rules is too great. So someone breaks rules and then everyone has to break the rules. So at this point, a lot of tech companies actually don't publish patents, but in America, they have special laws about proprietary technology. So they have the right to keep things secret, and corporate espionage is therefore a thing. It was about these sorts of things that the left used to talk about. There's a guy on the distant right who used to be a industrial spy called Billy William Gates. He has a YouTube channel. It's very tiny. He talks a lot about economy and astrophysics, but he actually was convicted of corporate espionage, and because of him, there was a law instituted about this sort of thing. Quite an interesting guy. Yeah, no, that's just what I would say. Narrowing of the topics the left talks about. This would be an example.
Can I just to have a little bit of a brief debate on this? It strikes me like as a naive person, I might say that copyright law is justified, and even software, the Linux stuff with its relation to computers is also justified. So do you want to just explain to naive people like me why?
Well, if you take a utilitarian perspective, say someone has developed, well, the example would be pharmaceutical companies, for example. Do pharmaceutical companies have the right to patent drugs and keep healing medicine away from people and raise immense cost barriers to it? Or do they have an ethical duty to just publish that and let everyone who can produce it make it? And this is actually quite current with the vaccine discussions. The USA wanted to enforce patent right on the vaccines in the US, and the European Union actually agreed with them and sort of not agreed with them. And there was a discussion about it. Now they're giving the patent free, I believe. But that would be an example. If you apply utilitarian ethics, should one individual, despite it being his creation and his individual genius who made it, although these days, of course, most projects are made by teams of engineers and scientists, not individual geniuses, but should he be able to benefit from it, or should it benefit the whole of society? And it's kind of like you want a balance of both. And the original idea of copyright was like it would last like 20 years. So you had the benefit of producing whatever medium or medicine or technological product. You had the exclusive right to sell and do with that what you wanted. But then it became public good because it was for the whole of humanity better if that became open access. And there's people on one side of the argument who say there should be absolutely no patent rights. If you develop something and it has general benefits, it should be open to everyone. And you've got more on the libertarian side, the property rights sort of argument where, you know, it's your property in perpetuity and you should be able to do what you want. If I develop a cure for cancer, I can just say, no, screw you, I'm not giving it to humanity because I think cancer is a good thing, actually.
I think I do understand now why these things are two-sided debates. I mean, personally, I'd say there has to be a balance between the two things. If someone comes up, if an inventor comes up with something clever, they really should get rewards for it. But at the same time, it should reach wider society if it's something very useful. That's why I'd always say you'd have to have a benevolent dictator just to, you know, to make this business happen.
Well, to put the aristocracy back in there, I made a recent video in Dutch about how we should reorient capitalism, and I believe the old German and Dutch model of capitalism was a lot better, which was a sort of combination of feudalism and capitalism, where you had families building businesses and looking primarily towards the continuity of the company from generation to generation. And they would, with the technologies they developed, they would make a profit, but they would make it just commercially available to everyone and do the best to produce it, because someone does need to produce the goods. Someone needs to produce the Ford T to make automobiles available and so on. And they would reinvest a lot of their money in better conditions for their workers and building up cities and community centers and parks and public works. Of course, this was partially also motivated by maintaining their own status and maintaining their own reputation, but that's what nobility does anyway. So I think back when sort of corporations were run in this sort of aristocratic family-based model of things, that was a lot better. And then copyright issue isn't so much an issue anymore as well, because it's not exclusively used for greed of capitalists. It's not exclusively used to motivate profit, but it gets shared around and it's sort of a mutually beneficial relationship. But again, that requires things like having a solid culture, having elites with ethical and moral belief systems and so on.
Yeah, indeed. I would certainly advocate something from that. I'm very much into the business of aristocrats, showing noblesse oblige. Grief says, look at the size of Faust. Faust, tell everyone what you can lift. Like, I want to know the weight, because it's shocking how heavy he can lift. Although Faust says it's not.
It's not.
Faust. I think you're just trying to demoralize me with psychological manipulation.
I did an overhead press, so shoulders and squat session. I mostly do a push press routine, compound lifts. I went for 150 kilo squat for 3 times 5 today, then pyramiding down to 140, 130, 120, 100, and then at 100 switch to front squats and do 3 times 5 of all of those. That's sort of a high volume deload sort of routine. I can squat more, but I've been a bit lazy. I'm working back up to 160, 170-ish right now. And with overhead press, I do strict press 70 for 5 times 5, and then it's push press 90 for 5 times 3. And then some accessory work, some side raises, bit of, curls just for, you want big arms, you want big shoulders, just, show off. That's the main reason. But strength doesn't necessarily show off. And this is non-impressive. Within like powerlifting and lifting communities, we say that strength sort of starts at 1 plate overhead press, 2 plate bench, 3 plate squat, 4 plate deadlift. I can do that, but that's by no means impressive. If you look at World's Strongest Man, you know, the deadlift starts at 400 kilos, the overhead press starts at 200 kilos, you know, so that's not impressive.
Well, I will say I can squat with like 70 kilograms at my maximum, and it took me a long time to get to that stage, and I don't think I'm terrible. I mean, I don't think I'm a professional either. But
well, there's also the Wilks method, so you calculate it based on body weight. So I'd be squatting like 1.3 times my body weight today, something like that. And how much do you weigh? Something like 80 kilos?
I guess so, yes.
Yeah.
I guess
so.
So
then you'd be close to like 0.9. So if you can squat your body weight, that's not terrible. If you can bench your body weight, that's better.
When you say a push press, do you mean a bench press?
No, overhead press. So a military press is just strict, just a regular press, right?
Right.
And a push press is when you also use legs in it.
Ah, okay.
My best push press is like 110. I did it a few weeks ago, but I kind of went too fast, so I kind of hurt my shoulder on that one.
Yes, yes. Well, very, very interesting. To get back to what we were talking about, we were talking about the aristocracy. What was I going to go into? Oh yes, the stuff about. Oh yes, I know what I want. Okay, this is not something which I think we can get into today. But you said there that most scientific discoveries are carried out by groups of scientists these days.
Yes.
Rather than individuals. I will have to disagree with you on that, but I'm not sure that this is the debate to get into it. I personally think that it's completely.
There's some breakthroughs that are only achieved by geniuses, but a lot of the sort of minor improvements, sort of the systems improvement, that's done by teams, like developing new vaccines, developing new drugs, developing new Pentium processors, making better microchips. This is generally done by teams of engineers. It's very, very few. Like there's a few guys, like in mathematics, you'll have the occasional genius make a breakthrough or something like that. Particularly in mathematics, this does still happen. It doesn't really happen in things like biology or engineering that much anymore.
I agree with what you're saying when you're talking about like improvements of software and computers. I know what you're talking about there. I still think, however, that if you've got a team of software workers doing something, out of those lot, there might be like a team leader who is really good at working out solutions, and everyone else is just sort of aiding him.
Right, but say, for example, in the field of philosophy, name a truly outstanding philosopher on the level of like Nietzsche or someone like that from the past century. I don't think you could name any. But like you've got people who make interesting system analysis, like a few of the Marxists I mentioned, like Lacan, like Baudrillard. Here and there, you get people making interesting analysis and making sort of societal and sociological analysis. But I haven't seen anyone come up with truly differing paradigms in philosophy for, well, at least since Nietzsche, I think. Philosophy is a hard one for me to talk about because I don't know much about classical philosophy anyway. But let me take an equivalent example in art. Now, lots of people say, oh, there's no good artists around today in comparison to what there was, in ancient times. But I can definitely point to some artists who are just as good as the old masters. And that's despite all the cultural Marxism stuff, which keeps, good artists from making real money. Yeah. So I can't answer the question on philosophy, but when it comes to art, there are certainly geniuses around who are just as good as the old masters. I'm afraid that is sort of subjective, isn't it? Because I do believe that there is such a thing as objective aesthetic beauty in the Kierkegaardian sense of things. But if they're truly as good as the past, it's a bit of a matter of debate, really, and taste.
I think if you look at someone like Anthony Vitulis, you would have to take your hat off to him and say, my God, this guy is a total genius on the level of the old masters. But if you don't like the artistic example, then let's come to mathematics, which I'm very familiar with. And I will say, Gregory Perelman, this guy who solved the Poincaré conjecture, or someone like Andrew Weilman, who solved Fermat's last theorem. These guys are outstanding geniuses of the highest caliber. So
yes,
I'm not sure.
In mathematics, this happens because the scope is limited enough that one particularly difficult problem can still be solved with just sort of the potential calculating capacity of one human brain. With really complex systems and with engineering problems, this becomes very difficult to do. I mean, one man might be able to design a really efficient electrical car, it would just take him a lot of time. And really, I don't think he could compete with a whole team of people doing that. And then he just developed a better electrical car, which isn't really world shattering.
Yeah. It's an interesting debate, and we will come back to it at a different time. Thomas Barnes, how many middle-aged women can you push over in a park? It depends what kind of mood I'm in, but potentially an awful lot.
But are they like lined up like in a bowling alley, or do you have to go for them individually?
They can be lined up as in a bowling alley. Let me come to some other of your points that you've written down here, Faust. Yes, let me see. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which other topics you want to talk about on this.
Just check real quick.
Now,
well, the point on general I wanted to sort of make with this stream, and I had hoped to get some other people on and to get the chat a bit talking about this, as maybe some other people having some experience in the left. It's that, well, the left seems to just have lost a lot of its intellectual ability and lost a lot of its idea, narrowed very much in scope to just this specific societal progress sort of thing, and that they have lost a lot of interesting things to say. Now, I already said that I think this has to do with sort of the democratization and popularization of the left, and that any movement, for it to be interesting and producing interesting ideas and have interesting discussion, it has to be elitist to an extent, and that spraying things to the masses will always destroy any intellectual side of it. And that's sort of the general point I wanted to make.
Yes. You wanted to talk about books like Economic Hitman, for example.
He's just one of those examples about, well, again, when I was in the left, the whole thing of imperialism and economic exploitation was a big thing, fighting war for oil in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the American empire enslaving people economically in the IMF. These were things they talked about. These days I only hear the distant right talk about how the American empire is a thing, and there's such a thing as an economic power center within central banking and the IMF and so on. Again, it's just an example of their topics and focus narrowing, and them having very little interesting to say, and being unable to do any good analysis of the world around them, partially because they live in a sort of self-created world.
I think I should say something on this, because when I was back in university, I was surrounded by a lot of leftists who hated George Bush Jr. And this was actually before he even got elected. My final year in university was 2000, where it was the election, George Bush versus someone else, and all the leftists I was surrounded by couldn't stand him, and I didn't really care at all. But anyway, what I wanted to say is, actually, and later on, a lot of these leftists were into things like Michael Moore, Fahrenheit 9/11. And I never liked any of them. And then in 2013, I got into 9/11 Truth. And that was the point, because I was like a right winger at that point. And then when I got into 9/11 Truth, I kind of realized, well, oh my God, the left were correct. All these people who hated George Bush, it turned out to be correct. All these people who were watching Michael Moore turned out to be correct. But then I very quickly got back to these people and told them about things like 9/11, and they thought that was just a wacky conspiracy. And I tried to explain that it's entirely related to the wars in the Middle East, and if you're a Michael Moore fan, you should take an interest in these things. So the point that I want to make is that it seems to me that the left have always been, I kind of realized at this moment in time that the left were utterly stupid, and that they've always just been on this side of the establishment. And a lot of the issues that they claim to care about, you know, they simply don't care about.
No, no. Like I said, I think they're looking for power and social acceptations and saying things others want to hear because they're not very intelligent people, a lot of them, just vying for status. I actually don't mind the left existing or even liberals existing. I think if you look at Germany in 1914, when the Social Democratic Party voted for war bonds and for the service in the war, and only a very minor faction of what would later become the Communist Party disagreed, I think that as long as you have a uniting culture, uniting religion, and especially a higher ideal of the nation, because everyone was a German nationalist, or almost everyone, at least back then. And if you have that higher ideal, then you can disagree on economics. You can disagree a bit about individualism versus collectivism, but you do need to have that sort of solid basis, and you do need to have an understanding that there are betters and lessers, and that there is such a thing as hierarchy. And I think from that point on, we can argue about how we should structure the economy slightly differently, or maybe pass this law or that about allowing women to vote or whatever. Well, maybe not that one. But
but I just think a lot of people will say that the left don't stand for anything today, and yet, in my opinion, I'm not sure they ever really stood for anything. Having said that, I do think there were genuine people amongst the left. There were more genuine people on the left in the past, but as a general movement, that I think they were always sort of stacked full of idiots who didn't really care. They care more about, like, you know, having a cause and virtue signaling than actual sort of real problems. I mean, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. One person who I quite like is Naomi Wolf, who is she's still sort of, I guess she'd still describe herself as a leftist, but she has over the years kind of, you know, often said things along the lines of, this isn't what the left stands for. I mean, for example, when feminism started to get very hysterical, she came out and denounced some feminists. And at various different stages, like now with the censorship, she's sort of coming out and saying this isn't what the left stands for. So I do agree. I do think there are like some genuine leftists, and there've always been some genuine leftists, and that as things have changed over time, especially in recent years, they've kind of come out to say this isn't what the left stands for.
Jonathan Bowden, in one of his speeches, once said that there's a big duality in leftist movements, where there will be these incredibly naive people who want to improve the world and just want everyone to get along and humanity to just be nice to each other. And then you've got these absolute sociopaths who are willing to just put millions into gulags and shoot them in the back of the head to get things done. And it's kind of an irony that these people are in the same movement together. But in both cases, it is a profound lack of understanding of the real world and being grounded in the real world that makes these people like that. The sociopaths, to an extent, can also be disprivileged people who've been done hard by society and are looking for revenge. And you've got to look out for people like that coming into positions of power. And I think that's one of the reasons there was so many Jews in the Bolshevist movement, is that they did feel hard done by the Russian Empire, by the Tsar. And maybe they did have some legitimate grievances, but they kind of started taking it out and taking revenge to a massive extent. And yeah, you've got to look out for, that's why you need to build a good society to an extent as well, right? So you don't create these sorts of people. And I think modern society has a lot of people who want to take vengeance. It has a lot to do with both Whig-nats and anarcho-communists professing to be so willing to kill each other online. It's because they've become very disgruntled and disenfranchised by the modern system. And really, they shouldn't be trying to kill each other, but maybe just look at the bankers.
Yeah, sure. Well, listen, at this point, I'm happy to bring on Ivan the Heathen. I've sent you a link. So if you look in your email, you'll see that there. I don't know whether he's still around in the chat, though, but we can bring you on at this point. I want to bring up a few points about what we might say the left is. The left correct on any of these issues? Are the left correct on Palestine, for example? I mean, what's your opinion on that, Faust?
They can kill each other for all I care. I don't care. The only problem I have is them trying to drag us into their problems.
Okay. I don't know what to say on Palestine. I think the most obvious thing to say on Palestine is that surely the Israelis are maybe overstepping the mark. I think that's the first obvious thing you can say. But then when you get into it, you realize sorry?
You're English. What are you talking about? You took Palestine as well. I mean, you took 25, 30% of the world like that. I mean, come on. If someone's overstepping the mark here, surely it was the British Empire. I don't think you're in a position to tell anyone that they're maybe being a bit too violent.
Okay, Faust, we've had this argument before. I've tried to. Okay, I don't represent the British Empire. I don't represent the British Empire, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know you like to play this game where you put everyone into the nationality that you think they are. I first of all, I've said plenty of condemnatory things about the British Empire. If you want to look, if you want to say that it was the British who are invading Palestine, that's fine. I'm happy to say that because there's some truth in it, you know.
I just think it's kind of weird to have a double standard like that. It's fine when we do colonialism, but not them. It's like I don't really care. Be as imperialist if you like, just as long as it doesn't affect me, you know, my people, my country.
I am not an English colonialist.
Well, you should
really.
be.
Why?
That's kind of working on your own history.
Well, I don't. I'm not maybe as English as you'd like to think I am. You know, I'm not.
So the rumors are true. You are Welsh.
There is actually some truth in that. You know, I'm not and never have been an English colonialist. But look, if you want to say that the Balfour, you know, what led to Israel and Palestine, the Balfour Declaration did. So there's no sense of you know, I'm happy to say the English are involved in the Palestinian problem. I'm just trying to say, to get back to the left, is that I think at least the Israel-Palestine stuff is complicated. And there's lots of people who just hate Israel because it's seen as a colonial power and the Palestinians are brown. And so they want to stand up for them. And I know the Palestinians cause a load of shit for the Israelis. But all that said, there is a sense that the Israelis get away with certain things which other people might not get away with.
Yeah. Well, to get to your point about is the left right about anything, I think they see the same problems we do, but they have a different perspective on it, and their ideology twists them into taking strange turns to try and find solutions and to try and explain it. I think they are right to an extent that economic inequality is bad, not because we should punish the strong for being successful, but because the current system is perverse and is not acting in the general interest of nation or people or higher ideals or anything. So I think they're right to an extent that the current inequality is bad. Their solutions are just stupid. And the same thing with environmentalism. I think we should have a better relation with nature. We should have a better understanding of our own relation as animals with nature. We should treat nature better. But the current solutions they propose are dumb. Let's work together with the big mega corporations. Let's not reduce our lifestyles at all. Let's be just the same consumerist, overfed American cattle, and not be willing to make any sacrifices. So I think they have at their core seen the problem. In Dutch we say, ze hebben de bel gezien, maar weten niet waar de kleppel hangt. So they've identified the issue, but their analysis is wrong and their solutions are wrong.
Yes, I do definitely agree with that. I often want to say to leftists, I think one of the misconceptions that the left have about people on the right is that we love the world as it currently is. And we're like, if capitalists are exploiting people, we're just absolutely delighted about that. So I often try to explain this to leftists, that they're right to hate the world. They're right to want to change it for the better. It's just their analysis of this and their proposed solutions are wrong. However, they're not usually they're not usually that up for, you know, their minds are not open to the possibilities. One thing I wanted to come to is some criticism for people on the right. Some of my major criticisms of people on the right would be, well, the normicons, for example, are really, they're just not very intelligent. They are literally, you know, there is truth to some of these stereotypes that the left put out about normicons being really stupid. They're often very obedient to an establishment, even when that establishment is obviously against them. I mean, what criticisms would you have, first of all, of normicons?
Well, I think, again, these are also well-intentioned people. They sort of, like, to look at, for example, the QAnon types and the sort of 3%er Americans and libertarians. They have sort of got an idea of the problem, sort of an idea of some sort of ideal, and they want to return, but they don't quite know what's going on, and they don't quite know how to solve it. The problem there, I think, is that they're also not very intelligent people, and they don't have an elite to guide them either. And, well, the left has an elite, but they're purposely misguiding them, and the conservatives do not have an elite, or insofar they have an elite, it's the likes of Ben Shapiro and such, and they don't have much of a great leadership. So, what's my opinion on conservatives? I think they're sort of the salt of the earth. They're what most of society should be, just, you know, family people working, but they should not be engaged in politics. They should just have this gut feeling of you should marry and have kids and work a proper job and don't complain and don't be a fag, that sort of thing, you know. But if you make that all political, well, you're sort of already going off the rails there. That's for the priests and intellectuals to make sense of for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I think often a problem that we have in our circles is that we use the words left and right very generally, and I don't, you know, people will say, why are people on the left so stupid and people on the right so intelligent? And I think that's a really, really poor analysis of what's going on. I think first of all, most of the normicons, and second of all, at least sections of more dissident right-wingers are not really that more intelligent, at least when it comes to certain issues.
No, and there's so many morons on our side who ruin things for us. People who go on shooting sprees, people who go posting all kinds of nonsense online. You know, all this infighting, for example, I think that has a lot to do with low IQ people as well. Yeah,
indeed. Ivan the Heathen is on his way. Let me put out to the chat now. If you want to ask a question, of either Faust or myself, please do. Unwoken One, I'm interested in what your beef was. I think Unwoken One might be upset that I said something naughty about Israel. Do you want to explain what your problem is? Faust. Oh, Ivan says he's here. I can't see you yet, Ivan. I've sent you the link, so you should be able to join, I think. I should be able to see you at some point. Going back to what you said on Telegram, Faust, I feel like we covered most of the points. But is there anything else you'd like to add to what you said here?
No, it's covered most things. I'd like to maybe go into depth on some of these topics with people who are more specialized on it, like talk about copyright patents and open source with someone who's actually a software engineer who really engage with that sort of movement. I have some friends who are involved with it, but unfortunately they don't want to stream about it because they're afraid of being doxxed. Maybe someone like a biologist or something to talk about environmentalism. It'd be good to have some more specialized people, you know.
I don't know whether that's a passive-aggressive dig at me.
No, not necessarily. You're not a biologist, are you?
Technically, I think I'm a biologist, yes. I think I would regard myself as a biologist. I think we said that on the last STEM stream. So I think I do think I would qualify as a biologist.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me try and sort this thing out with us.
I'll just have a fight with the chat then in the meantime. Let's see.
Okay. Okay.
To grief. I was actually doxxed in a major Dutch newspaper. In fact, the Dutch media love me. I get requests to talk to them all the time because I'm one of the few people who puts my face out there. And Faust is my real name. No one ever believes it, but yes, that's my real name. I was doxxed in 2017 in a major newspaper expose about the movement I was part of at the time. And even just last week, I got another invitation from a major newspaper to talk to them. But, you know, never talk to the media. Yeah.
Do you, Faust, just on this, before we come to you, Ivan, sorry, are you willing to like talk to the media if it was like live television, or just not at all? Nothing.
Never talk to the media.
You think that's the best policy?
Good yes. Never.
Never. Even if you go on, they invite you on. I've been on Dutch TV actually, and I've been on Russia Today as well. But if you get invited on a panel and they know you're coming, they're going to put all kinds of guests in front of you. They're going to be prepared with targeted questions. And even if I show up there with a briefcase full of studies, they're not going to let me get a word in edgewise. And it's just going to be constant attacks. You're not going to be able to get anything out of it. The same thing with a written interview. They'll just edit out anything intelligent you have to say. And the same thing with a documentary. You don't know what kind of skinheads or other idiots they'll glue in between what you're saying. You know, so never talk to the media. Just put your own words out there within your own context and let people judge it by itself.
Is Russia Today really not a possible platform for dissidents to go on? Russia Today?
They're not, to an extent, but I mean, I trust Russia Today faster than I trust American or Western European media.
Did they do a
you know, Russia Today, like in the Ukrainian context, for example, they really push this, we're fighting against the Nazis, Nazi Ukrainian, so...
Yeah. This is something I can talk about, being Ukrainian myself. I mean, they have, you know, they've run all sorts of absurd stories that they banned the use of the Russian language in Ukraine, that they've begun, you know, gutting and crucifying children. Absurd, like World War I level atrocity propaganda has been on there, and it's so just primitive and stupid. So to the
over 6 million Russian civilians were killed in Donetsk.
Oh, 6 gorillion, yes. Yeah. But yeah, it just really primitive and kind of stupid propaganda, but in that particular area. Now, when they talk about America or something like that.
Ivan, let me just cut you out there and just ask, the sound is a little bit strange. I don't know whether it's the mic, is the mic connected okay?
Yes, can you hear me, or is it, what's going on?
You can hear you. It's a little
okay.
Okay, is that better? I didn't do anything, but.
Okay, we'll continue with that for a while. Do you want, can I ask you to go, because we've only got 40 minutes left, and is it possible that you ask Faust, or you bring up some points about what you've heard, or you can continue with or please continue with what you were saying.
I'd like to hear even stakes on what I said earlier. Yeah.
About what? Russia Today?
No, about environmentalism, leftism becoming more stupid, democracy being inherently lowest common denominator, that sort of thing.
Okay. I mean, the more I listen to you, the more I find that I kind of agree with you 90% of the time as it is. So what you're saying about this kind of lowest common denominator tendency, I think that happens with everything that becomes popular.
Yes.
Yeah, something which, you know, is on the fringes by nature is only going to extract a few bizarre people. These people are going to be unconventional thinkers. They're going to be unusually creative, and at a time when those are the people dominant within the movement or the cultural form or whatever it is, you're going to see a lot of creativity. This is true not just in political movements, but in, you know, art, in, you know, different styles of music being developed. You see this really in any social trend. That's the basic gist of it. Normies ruin everything, really. You know?
Well, you made that video about this, right?
Right, yeah.
You made a video where you said that sort of whenever something becomes established, at some point, some generations later, there will be some intelligent people going against it, and the circle will continue on. And this is why you didn't want to make videos anymore. I really incorporated that into my thoughts about things like Spenglerianism and so on. I think that was a good takeaway, that video.
Yeah. I mean, it's there is this kind of never-ending, just, you know, cycle of I don't even know how to put it, but basically, if you live in a certain world like ours right now, and we see the problems with the left, we see all of this kind of thing that's going on, and we criticize it very well. Now, if you fast forward enough, you can imagine a hypothetical future where the sorts of criticisms that people like us are pushing forward have gained traction and the culture has shifted, right? But
yes.
when that happens, there's going to be its own version of complacency that develops on the right, and then you're gonna have those creative leftists that we're all lamenting, you know, that don't.
Decadence is inevitable. What's it? Entropy. It's just entropy.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just human nature. We cut corners and we're lazy, and if barriers to entry are low enough, that swamps everything. Normies ruin everything. Yeah.
And I think in the context of a great philosopher and a new philosophy coming along, whoever managed to find a way to break that cycle, that will be a true genius.
Well, also there's also a kind of problem because I'm pretty familiar with a lot of contemporary philosophy, and there are some extraordinarily intelligent people working in it. Like Alvin Plantinga is freakishly smart. No one but a freakishly intelligent person could have written a book like The Nature of Necessity. And I say that despite disagreeing with a good bit of what's in it. So it's not that intellectual horsepower isn't there. What I take you to be referring to when you talk about geniuses is just someone who introduces a completely new paradigm and founds a totally new way of thinking. Not necessarily some, freakishly smart autist who like picks apart everything and is kind of like a powerful critic. We have that. We have another example would be the science.
Criticism is inherently negative, in my opinion. It doesn't build anything.
That's true, but before you can build, you must destroy. You know.
Ivan, I'm going to ask you to leave the chat and go and see if your microphone's properly connected to StreamYard. There's some issue with your mic. It's not like it usually is. So can you leave the chat and then connect again? But I think it's
on.
If you go into settings,
is that better? Yeah.
Yes, much better.
Okay, there we go. All right, it connected to my webcam instead of my mic. I don't know why. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay, no problem. Let me ask this question from Faustian Spirit, who says, I have a question for Faust. Are there any aspects of Americana which you recognize as redeemable or extensions of European traditions, cowboys, for example?
Well, not specifically cowboys, but the frontier spirit, I think, is a sort of uniquely American expression of Faustianism. I rather like books like Jack London and Melville and sort of like the exploration of a new continent and domesticating the wilds, in a sense. I think that part of the American tradition was quite unique and quite redeemable. That died in the 30s, 40s, 50s, wherever you exactly want to pinpoint it. But that was, in my opinion, what America was from when it became independent up until about the end of the 19th century. That's what you see in a lot of its tales. There's, of course, American folk tales, Johnny Appleseed, Wendigo, stories about Indians, and so on. All of this is completely out of the American zeitgeist. It's completely out of American culture. I don't think America is what it used to be anymore. It's lost that sort of frontier spirit. It's become bourgeois, decadent, an empire in decline. And so maybe there were some things redeemable about America, but not much anymore. And I think it just doesn't have the deep roots and the long history and the actual sense of itself to recover from it like European nations have. I won't deny that Europe is in a very large decadent decline as well. I think, though, we would be able to recover from it, and I think America probably won't.
I think that America, in contradistinction to what Faust is saying, I think America does actually have a haute culture, but it's not often obvious what it is. There is absolutely an American high culture, and I will be happy to have this debate in future with you, Faust, about America, and I will point to some very big achievements. I agree, however, with Faust's analysis that American pop culture is really dumb and it's been exported to the world over, and it's not something I particularly want to be marinated in. Ivan, do you want to say something on that, or do you want to ask, bring up some more points related to the discussion we were having in the first hour?
Have you ever been on the left, Ivan?
I was thinking about that when the stream started. I have a bit of an interesting story about that. You both discussed how you had certain experiences. I think, Tom, you said you were with Oxfam and you encountered the migrants and saw what they were really like, and it disabused you of the whole thing. I have similar experiences to yours, except that it happened to me much earlier in my life. So there was almost no period where I was especially inclined to have much sympathy for people like this. Just very brief kind of general stuff about my background. I immigrated with my mother to the United States from Ukraine when I was about 4, and she had nothing. She did not speak the language, barely any money, and we settled in, a poor area with a lot of Eastern European immigrants and just basically a lot of poor people. There were a good bit of minorities around and so forth. So basically, for the first few months of that, it was just me and her until eventually my father was able to join us. But so she would have to go to work, and 4-year-old me would be left alone at home. She would have no other choice. And she said to me, "Thank goodness you were not an ordinary child, because I have no idea what the hell I would have done." So I would sit there, all day, kind of by myself, bored, seeking to amuse myself. And one of the things I would do is I'd sit by the apartment window and look outside at the people gathered in the area. And this was, basically underclass people. And I would see them loitering around, smoking, drinking, occasionally doing drugs, and these kind of things. And I began to wonder to myself, okay, well, my mother is at work, so why aren't these people there? Mm-hmm. And it eventually dawned on me that some of the people in the underclass, let's call it, can't be helped because they don't want to be helped. They're poor because of the choices they make and because they've decided to live a certain way.
Which is why society should force them to.
Well, this gets you into the thing about communism. So when I encountered the left a bit later, even though I did have a brief period where I sort of flirted with it when I was maybe 14 or 15, but just in a way of like, oh, this is interesting. It's different from anything I've heard, so let me have a look at this. But when I would encounter the part of the left-wing view of the world that essentially just blames poverty and social dysfunction on society, quote unquote, instead of the actual people doing it, I would bring this up with a lot of people sympathetic to those views and basically say, okay, what about people who don't want to work? What do you do with them? And what I realized very quickly is that communists have two answers to this question. There's an exoteric answer and an esoteric answer. And the exoteric answer is that we pretend that these people don't exist and we just ignore the problem. The esoteric answer is we shoot them.
Which is also a solution. But what I mean by force them is more like you have to have an ethic and a morality, and the church will teach you, and your society, and it will make sure that your family will look down on you if you don't participate.
If by force them you mean put social pressure on them,
Yes.
If you knock up some girl in your neighborhood, you have to marry her now.
Yes,
that sort of thing. Yes, I agree with that. I mean, don't literally shoot them. I wouldn't do the communist thing. Although, it's a solution. But
on a purely abstract theoretical level, yes.
But yeah, basically this is something I just did when I was a kid. I would just watch people from the window, and I just learned directly that some people were just lazy, degenerate scumbags, and you can't help them because they don't want to be helped. So I've never had much sympathy for those kind of people, and that really limited how far left I could go. So that's my story with the left. I had the same brief flirtation that every young person has, but it didn't last long.
A more intellectual leftist would have told you something like, it's not that they are unwilling to work, but they have been disprivileged by the system, and the system has made them alienated from their own labor, and therefore any work they put in will feel unrewarding, and so on.
Right. But of course. But here's the thing. My mother came to the U.S. with $100. She didn't speak English. What privileges did she have? Somehow she found a job, and yet these people don't. I saw this almost immediately. So I've never had much patience for that kind of thing.
Yes, well, but again, they do have an answer for it. Of course,
it's just not a good one.
Yeah, I think to any person, it doesn't matter how much indoctrination you take, for any person with their eyes open who is good at perceiving people in reality, you know, they will very quickly come to the conclusion that a lot of the things that the left say about equality are just nonsense. And, you know, I certainly have very similar experiences to what you say, Ivan, you know, in terms of the people I grew up with. They gave me a very good indication that you can take the beast to water, but you can't make it drink. And I think that has informed a lot of my thinking. Is there any other points that that we
the leftists, for example, you'll hear them say quite reactionary things, normal people sometimes. And you can tell them a lot of things and convince them of a lot of things if you just don't use the Pavlovian terms. Because the thing is, they've been indoctrinated to hear that little bell ringing. And when the bell rings, they go, oh no, I have to give this pre-programmed response. Equality is good. No, we're all equal. Diversity is good. Yes, yes. The bell rings in their head. And there's these people, a lot of people don't act like they actually believe these things. White flight is a phenomenon for a reason. You know, you get all of these macro trends in society which clearly indicate people do not act or believe in it. But when, you know, asked, the bell will ring and they'll give the desired response. And that's, you just even with their own little bell in their head.
Yeah, even among the upper classes, which you would expect to be the most severely propagandized of all, how many of these, you know, millionaires and billionaires living in their palatial estates are willing to invite refugees into their homes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm totally with you guys on the leftism stuff. As I said, I've beyond a very brief kind of, and also it was like a purely intellectual flirtation too. Like when I encountered communism for the first time, and I said, well, we can totally reorganize society differently. There'll be no private property. You know. Poverty will be abolished. Okay, very nice, very nice. I thought, now how do we do this? Like, brass tacks, how do we actually enact this? And I began searching through the literature, and I just could not find anything that was persuasive. And the thing is, if I had actually found a respectable answer that I could take seriously, I might have gone down that road, but I just didn't. And I looked for it. I really did. So yeah, so my flirtation with the left pretty much ended there. That's as far as.
How about this one? I believe you made a video on this, but I don't quite remember. What about the idea of UBI becoming inevitable and sort of Marxism and communism becoming inevitable due to automatization and the increased the fact that humans simply cannot actively produce anything of value anymore in the economy because everything has been automatized, and therefore we'll just need to be kept alive on a sort of life support system without anything purposeful to do because we literally can't.
Well, there are a lot of issues that go into that, and you can make a couple of choices as to how to tackle it. One way is to just sort of take for granted that AI really does have the capacity to do that, and I sort of did that more or less in a video. Now, to be clear, that's not actually my view. I think that there are certain machines are not intelligent. Let's put it this way. Machines are.
Why do they not have the potential?
All right. Let's see. How do I?
Why could carbon not be, or well, our neurons are based on carbon? Why could you not build something like neurons based on silica? I don't see a reason why that wouldn't be possible.
Well, first you have to have a good answer for the question of what intelligence is. If you view it in terms of a purely kind of functional thing, as a purely
computational model of intelligence, yes.
Right. If you view it that way, then it does seem kind of strange that, you know, why couldn't you have it? Yes. Now that's not my view. I mean, I think intentionality, which is a piece of philosophical jargon, but basically aboutness and directedness is sort of fundamental to what intelligence is. And computers, when they analyze a problem, I like the way John Searle put it, the philosopher. He basically said that really at the purely physical level, there's no such thing as computation. Because when you think of computation, you think of a computer working through a problem, adding up or multiplying a column of numbers or whatever. You interpret that in an intentional fashion. You see a problem, you see certain symbols, you ascribe meaning to those symbols, and then when the computer performs its operations, the result also has a certain corresponding meaning.
It runs through all possible possibilities, right. So it's really working towards one path.
No, but the computer doesn't do that. The computer doesn't understand, you know, what a binary string of digits is. It's at the purely physical level, you just have, you know, electrical impulses moving across wires. There's no such thing as computation. Computation is an inherently intentional structure.
Neurons are just transmitting electrical signals between each other.
Sure, but that's not what intelligence is.
What, Ivan, your main point in counterpart to what Faust is saying is that machines will always need humans to run them.
Yes, I mean, you could put it that way, just kind of if you want to simplify it, basically.
And if that's true, I mean, Faust.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, there's certain kind of narrow, extremely autistic things that machines can do incredibly well. But there are other things which they're terrible at doing. All right, for example,
I can put this very simply, like self-learning algorithms work by failure within set parameters, and you have to have the parameters. And the fact is, the real world is too complicated, has too many parameters, so current computation wouldn't be able to find its way within it. If no one presets what it should do, it's completely lost. It's essentially the idea of what you're trying to say, right?
In part, yes. And the reason for that is that the way in which computers tackle problems, that is by kind of splitting them into these kind of little atomic components, it's not how human beings think of things.
Right, but that system is how evolution works, right? Try something, if it works, keep it. If it doesn't work, failure state. And in evolution, it's death. Death of the organism is the failure state. In a self-replicating or a self-learning algorithm, the failure state is much cheaper, and it can simply much faster learn from that mistake. Therefore, I mean, if human and biological brains have been able to develop self-awareness simply through this evolutionary process over 4 billion years, I don't see why, especially with how fast self-learning algorithms can replicate this evolutionary chain, you couldn't at some point achieve that same point.
Okay, let's talk about machine learning algorithms for a bit. You can feed data into them, they analyze the data, and then they quote unquote learn from it. All right, now, who feeds the data to the machine? And not only who feeds the data, but once the data is fed into the machine, it's not fed in a kind of pure general way. You don't feed data to the machine.
It's targeted, yes.
You feed particular targeted streams of data. And by feeding those particular streams of data and not others, you direct the machine in a particular way,
yes,
as opposed to some other way. The machine doesn't do that on its own.
It's not what nature does to life. There are failure states and there are success states within nature. If you don't take into account gravity, well, your organism won't. You know, thermodynamics. So there are rules set by the natural world as well. And even though they are much broader than what humans would give to an AI, there's a way. I'm a very Darwinistic thinker. Actually, we were supposed to do this as a separate debate, weren't we? But
my fault. I'm in the middle of this, but yeah. Once I'm finished with it, and I nearly am, I'll be ready. Don't worry.
No,
Ivan.
Yes,
Ivan is,
Penrose, yes.
Ivan is showing you the book by A.V. Blanca called Evolution in 4 Dimensions. It's a book I've read a long time ago. We will be having a debate about whether neo-Darwinism is true, and that is coming up.
I don't know.
Well, yes, you will come on to defend neo-Darwinism, Faust, in this debate that we're going to have.
Right.
Ivan and I are more third-way evolutionists, so
bunch of esotericists.
Not at all. No, we are scientists. We believe in scientific facts. So
it's the kind of naive gene-centered view of evolution is much too.
You're going to come up with like the hard problem of consciousness and stuff like that, right? That's what you're going to do.
Well,
not at all, Faust.
No,
you're really underestimating me. Don't underestimate.
All right.
This is a battle. This is a battle between England and Holland. So I hope you're ready to put on your Dutch.
I'm getting in my submarine right now, and I'm going up to Chatham.
I'm not going to come on and say blah 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 consciousness. I will very much give you a good run for your money if you're going to come on and defend neo-Darwinism.
I haven't read anything particular in preparation for this, though, so I'll just be relying on what I know about biology, really. But all right.
Yes, we will talk about all this after the show, and I'll
yeah. I think we've kind of set it up now. I mean, Ivan with his microphone can do sort of an announcement about.
I'll be Bruce Buffer.
In the red corner.
I will be Bruce Buffer for the debate. Exactly. It's time. Yeah.
Well, I think we should keep that for the next time, because it will be a big debate and there's an awful lot to unpack. For the moment, do you want to go back, Ivan, to any other points that you heard Faust talk about and bring those up, and also questions from the chat? Think about them now and put a capital Q in front of your question.
Okay. There is one thing I wanted to mention when the two of you were discussing environmentalism, and that's this. Anyone who purports to be serious about the environmental problems in the world, who is not a vigorous booster of nuclear energy, is not someone I can take seriously. Just because the potential of that technology to generate power is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and it does so with no carbon pollution at all. The safeguards in typical nuclear power plants are so extraordinarily well designed, with safety emphasized so strongly, that you have to be insane not to be in favor of it.
Two examples of nuclear facility are Fukushima, where there was a level 9 on the Richter scale earthquake on a fault line. So that was a black swan sort of event there.
Yeah, that wasn't the fault of the plant designers, exactly.
No, exactly. Just you shouldn't put nuclear power centers in Japan. That's kind of the thing, or in the California break line or anything like that. And the other one in Chernobyl was during a stress test on military levels with very poor construction by a bunch of Soviets. So that was also just under extreme conditions with very poor maintenance.
Yeah, more specifically, what happened in Chernobyl was that they used a particular kind of nuclear reactor, which is no longer made. Current, modern nuclear reactors are moderated using water. So basically, in a nuclear reactor, they stream neutrons into the reactor to feed the reaction and break off subatomic particles from the atom to release additional energy. But normally, the neutrons are fired far too quickly for them to be caught up within the atom and actually break off subatomic particles. So in a reactor, you moderate the reaction by having it flow through water. And that slows down the neutrons that are being fired sufficiently so that they can be caught in the atom, so they can break parts of it off and release energy. And the reason why this system is so brilliant is if the reaction heats up too much, the water evaporates, and then the water is no longer there to moderate the reaction, and the neutrons stream by too quickly. So the reaction automatically shuts itself off if it grows too hot. Yeah. That's how current nuclear reactors are designed. In Chernobyl, the reactor was designed with graphite. It was moderated with graphite. So it actually heated up even further as the reaction heated up. It had a positive thermal coefficient, which is insanely stupid. You're playing with fire if you design it that way. But again,
even then, that still worked relatively well under normal conditions.
Right. But even so, I mean, no one designs the reactors that way. There's also the completely stupid thing where people are worried about nuclear power plants because they imagine, explosions like a nuclear bomb happening there. That is physically impossible. Not improbable, not extremely, physically impossible. The basic reason for that is that in a nuclear bomb, you have to have uranium or plutonium enriched up to about 90%, whereas in a nuclear power plant, you only need about 3% enrichment. So it's physically impossible for it to explode like a bomb.
Yes, yeah. The main concern I think a lot of people have is waste disposal. And the thing is, a nuclear power plant produces less than 100 kilos of waste a year. It's ridiculously low.
Exactly. Even in the Yucca Mountain facility that they've been wanting to build forever in Arizona, they've estimated the radiation from the waste that they plan to store there in the canisters that they plan to use, and it's something like 0.001 millirems. Some minuscule amount. And to put that in perspective, the average person's blood gives off about 20 millirems of radiation. In fact, radiation only becomes dangerous when you get to about 10,000 millirems. So I would literally be putting myself in greater danger of radiation poisoning merely by standing next to you than I would by having that disposal facility be in the vicinity.
Or eating a lot of bananas.
Right, yeah.
Potassium.
Is there any other points that we should come
I actually want to say one thing. It's like, you know, Elon Musk has this thing where he says, we are at a very close to a failure state if this planet goes down in some way or becomes uninhabitable. Therefore, we need to colonize other planets and so on. I think he's right about that. And then there's also this common idea that sort of leftism has slowed down technology, has destroyed technological progress. And not maybe necessarily in the fact that we have less engineers or less factories, but that we don't have aspirations, that we aren't working as a society together for greater goals. All the left does is sow division. You know, all it's about class, it's about sex, it's about race. Of course, all these things do matter to an extent, but I do think they're also distractions. And one of the things you can look at the elites for being and why they are absolutely evil is that they are looking at things just for their own power, their own satisfaction, their own greed, and they're not trying to work towards a higher purpose, to elevate humanity, to discover new things, to get at the truth of the core of the universe. It's a purely individualistic and greedy way of living. And I know you, Thomas, believe that at some point they'll switch this all around and they'll suddenly become good and now we're going to colonize the stars. I don't really believe that. I think when people descend into the depths of immorality like they have, they are incurable. But yeah, I think the left has destroyed because of the division it has caused, because it has focused so much on the individual and on the differences. We don't have a space race anymore. We're not trying to achieve anything as a society. Ask someone on the street, like, what are we doing anything for, right? Why are we doing these things as a society? They won't have an answer for you. Maybe in the past they'd say God, serve God, or I want to, to find truth. A Marxist might tell you, to bring happiness, to bring utopia to the earth. These days, a common man on the street won't have an answer for you.
Anyone, either among you or in the chat, who's interested in space exploration should really check out Robert Zubrin's books. He's a nuclear engineer, and he has all sorts of just fascinating ways to work out how they could get space travel done. And one of the things he discusses in a lecture I listened to, this has been a while ago, so my memory might be a bit fuzzy, but basically what he says is the reason why NASA isn't doing anything worth a shit anymore is because every little bureaucratic fiefdom and faction within the system wants its own pound of flesh and wants to stick its like special rocket design, or we want to put our special propeller on this and we want to add this component here.
We don't have enough black astronauts,
Right. And he looks at that whole system as an engineer and says 95% of this crap is unnecessary. You're just putting it there because you want to expand your little bureaucratic fiefdom and drain red.
Where are the days we just plug a hole in the spaceship with a bit of gum and use a pencil to get it?
Exactly. And when the Apollo missions used technology that was the equivalent of a freaking Game Boy, and
I know. Well, they are going, like, next year. NASA is trying to launch a permanent moon-based mission, the Artemis project 2022. So they're doing a little bit, and of course, Elon Musk's doing some stuff, but it's just not much,
Yeah.
Too much of our energy in society is going toward welfare and trying to uplift the unupliftable.
Right, and yeah. Just also just as from a standpoint of kind of like economic incentives, right? They're not. Small, honestly, I read very little science fiction, so I can't answer the small brain.
Ivan, finish your point, and then we'll come to the question.
Anyway, yeah. So just a general point about like economic incentives. The guys at NASA, they're gonna have their jobs no matter what. It's not like get to the moon or we fire you.
Here come the libertarian arguments. Let's go.
No, but it's true. It's not like they're saying get to the moon or we fire you, or get to the moon or we cut your pay. So like, who gives a shit? I'm just gonna stay here and coast. And Elon Musk too. You mentioned this. Tesla can't turn a profit. He's a corporate welfare whore himself.
Yes.
So
but at least he tries. So, at least the corporate welfare is going to some sort of good, even if he's just messing around.
Yeah, those weird trucks that look like tanks that you throw at the window and it shatters. Yeah.
Solar roadways, that was one of his. And he's got the tunnel drilling company as well to design and develop new tunnels. Like, there's a lot to critique Elon Musk about. He's a fucking weirdo, and he probably doesn't do as well as he could. But two things are in favor, in my opinion. One is he's at least trying to do something, and then, trying to develop things. And he's Afrikaans, so he's one of my people.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay. Well, that does help. You're right. I stand corrected.
He's not a Boer, I think, though maybe partially, but he is from South Africa.
Are you a Boer, Faust?
No, but Boer are Dutch, so there might be.
What's the difference between the Afrikaans and Boers then?
Afrikaans can refer to anyone mixed with English and others who weren't part of the Voortrekker descendants, who were really the ethnic Dutch, like hardcore sort of.
So you found
the Boer are right up there in the hierarchy for us Dutch, and then it's the Afrikaans, and then the English. We're just like, we're just gonna leave you here with the blacks. Goodbye.
Well, I love the way that you say that Elon Musk is one of yours, even though he's got English blood. That's again, your Anglophile tendencies are coming out. Do you want to answer this question from Grief?
It's because he knows that diversity is our strength.
Yes, exactly.
Small brain question: favorite science fiction film or book? Faust, you're into science fiction, I think.
I'm really actually not. I despise Star Trek and the likes of that. I've never watched it. I've read some science fiction, like your standards, like who's the guy from Starship Troopers? Moon's a Harsh Mistress, and these.
Robert Heinlein.
Yeah. Heinlein. You'd probably know him since he was such a big libertarian as well. So I've read a few, but like if I were to answer honestly, like, do I like science fiction? I just go for like Warhammer or something, because it's really the only proponent of a truly a romantic and heroic society, even though it can be completely ridiculous and over the top. It's one of the few mediums still sort of proposing the masculine in a very open way, and I know a lot of guys in the movement who were into Warhammer, and I would, if I were to give my children anything to play with, I'd say, Warhammer. That's good stuff. Masculine spirit, sort of idea, Faustian spirit.
Sure. I will say, in answer to your question, Grief, I'm not that much. I haven't read that much science fiction. I did read Asimov Foundation when I was about 18 and really enjoyed it. So I have mixed feelings about sci-fi in general. I think there's a lot of rubbish, but if sci-fi is done well, I think it's a very nice genre. Joe Taylor says
it can create an aspiration. It can sort of work as ideals. For a lot of people, Star Trek is that sort of an ideal to strive for, even though I think they maybe haven't really thought things through and it's just a dumb TV show. But it can serve as sort of a model of society. That's how Heinlein used it, to give societal critique and to give aspirations.
Yeah, I think I'm generally negative about Star Trek, but at its best, I think it does offer a nice vision for the future, and I can see why lots of people would sort of buy into that. Joe Taylor said,
total communistic propaganda. It's total communistic and humanistic propaganda.
Well, okay, I don't want to get into Star Trek here, and I don't want to come across as the fanboy. But when I look at people like Captain Picard on a ship, I think that's the sort of embodiment of hierarchy, and it's the embodiment of an intelligent man leading others forth. You don't agree with that?
Yes, I can see that. A friend of mine once said, like, Star Trek, that's the only thing intelligent people would have to do in a society plus scarcity, because you don't really have anything else you can really do with your time. So you go explore and try to find the mysteries of the universe. But yes, sure, he's hierarchical, but he's an incredible humanist and an individualist and an egalitarian. All his solutions are pacifism and so on. He's not a truly curious mind, and he's not willing to consider options and solutions outside of this indoctrinated liberal worldview. So I don't see it.
Yes. Okay.
I just generally think that the whole nerd culture associated with Star Trek is kind of bland and degenerate, and I steer clear of it. So I don't know much about this, and I'm blissfully ignorant about it. So
Yeah,
I try to be, but then half the people in the distant right are fans of Star Trek apparently, and then they keep talking about it. So you have to learn about it because you listen to their shows.
I will say I'm 11 years older than you guys, and maybe it was good when I was a teenager. I mean, I literally wouldn't have a clue what Warhammer is. I don't know whether that's a video game or something. So it's like, maybe it's something generational. Shall we come to this question from Joe Taylor?
If we have
Faust.
to.
Okay, I think
I don't have an opinion.
Yeah, neither do I.
Listen, I've never seen that particular documentary, but of course I'm red-pilled on World War II. So that's that. Guys, anything else you'd like to come back to? We've got about 5 minutes.
No, I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to talk about. Like I said, if there's follow-ups to do maybe on specialized parts of this, because it was a little broad, but on the whole, I think I got sort of across what I wanted to get across.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me in, Tom. And I had the opportunity to, you know, go crazy for a bit about nuclear energy, so that was nice. I got that plugged in there. So yeah, thanks for inviting me in. And
yeah, we do still have 5 minutes left. I just I don't want to cut off there. I just thought that you guys would still have a few more things to add. Yes.
Well, I would say maybe some general advice to people is do try to connect a little bit more with nature. Go for a walk in nature. You know, consider your lifestyle. Consider what you could scrap, because you don't have to live like a decadent American. You don't have to eat 15 burgers and 10,000 liters of soda a day.
Hey, just to come back to one thing, Faust, I'm genuinely interested that you are only 30. I thought you were quite a lot older. I mean, I think
Yes.
there's a huge gulf between my generation and yours, because I didn't even have the internet properly until I was about 30.
And I grew up on a farm, so I didn't grow up with internet or TV.
At what age did you have the internet permanently in your room?
Maybe 16, 15.
Okay, I would still say that's very, very different to what I had. I got a television for my room with 4 channels on when I was 16 or 17, and I wouldn't get internet access to in my room until I was about 30. And I think this really does make a profound difference. Ivan.
Yeah, that's very different from my life. I had internet when I was maybe 8. I mean, it was dial-up and it was shit, but I had it. So yeah, I mean, there's a very small chunk of my life that was without it. Large enough that I'm
trying to stay with that, Thomas.
I'm trying to say, honestly, I can't tell you. When I got red-pilled, I was like, oh my God, these stupid people on the internet who know nothing, they're actually correct. Whereas I think you guys would have always been involved in online culture naturally, organically, whereas I had to make this kind of leap. But
not very much, no. I sort of got into it right around the time I was getting red-pilled as well. So when I was around 20, 21, 22 sort of age.
Okay, but I still think that's kind of important, because I didn't get red-pilled until I was 33. I was like a fully grown man kind of realizing that the kids on the internet were onto something. I do think it makes a difference. I'm not sure we have the time to go into it here.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, Tom, applies more to me than it does to Faust. I mean, in my case, the red pilling process started when I was about 16, and then it was kind of gradual from there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sure. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. It's been a good conversation, and both Faust and Ivan will be back in future and back very soon. We're going to do our discussion on neo-Darwinism, and we'll probably do more debates in future. I've certainly got more with Ivan lined up, and I want to debate Faust on Americana and American culture in future. So
burn it all with fire.
Thanks very much to everyone who tuned in. I'm coming back for more streams. I've got Apollonian Germ coming up. I've got Ralph Right Reaction coming up. various different people. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. And thanks once more to our guests, Faust the Disagreeable and Ivan the Heathen.
Thanks. God shoots the Kaiser.
All right.